he still holds out hope. Despite being in the hospital, he maintained his positive attitude. He persuaded his loved ones that his motor functions had been preserved by the spinal surgeon. He wasn't even unhappy when the doctor couldn't perform a specific test on the day she promised because she was too busy. Wyatt didn't want Judd to miss another shift even if he had wanted to be there when the test was over. His mother will fill him in, he assured his father. Little Piper was still a young child. Her mother's car was stolen by some jerk at the petrol station. Piper was still inside the vehicle when it was stolen. She was sitting in the backseat. Additionally, he was abusing drugs. He was driving erratically as a result of his hazy vision. As soon as it occurred, her mother dialed 911. APD and AFD deployed without delay. They devised a plan to try to contain the carjacker, but he startled them by attempting to drive through fences. He had used drugs. He was in a tight spot. He ultimately crashed his car into a swimming pool. To protect his own life, the driver got out. He didn't even try to keep Piper's alive. The first person there, Owen, dove into the pool. He discovered Piper. He used his trusty knife to help him get her, and he gave Tommy her lifeless body. The crew led by Tommy was responsible for regaining Piper's pulse. The first responders were reminded of the possibility of miracles at times like these. Judd needed to see that since Marlene had contacted him, there was a good chance Wyatt wouldn't leave. He seemed to be losing the use of his legs. He is unable to work as a firefighter. Once he learns the truth about his situation, he might lose hope. When the doctors arrived with their findings, Wyatt was asleep. Medical power of attorney is held by Marlene. She called Judd after the doctor informed her of Wyatt's diagnosis since she wasn't sure how to convey the news to Wyatt. Judd struggled with how to tell the news to his kid as well. He discussed it with Tommy, who remarked that he still had mobility in his upper body. What matters is that. Judd was reminded of this by Tommy, and she added that the loss wasn't actual. They witnessed miracles on a daily basis at work, and Wyatt could experience a personal miracle. If his legs never regain motor control, he will always have his family. Together, they decided to inform Wyatt. They told him the bad news. He was being dismantled as they watched. The possibility that he would never walk again disturbed him. He didn't want to be told that in order to develop his self-care skills, he would have to enter a facility. Then Judd caught sight of him. He understood his son couldn't handle it. Judd made the decision that Wyatt should relocate with them. Wyatt might be able to doze off in the living room. Judd wanted to quit his job so that he could be there for him, so he would also get around-the-clock care. Later, he revealed to Grace that he felt compelled to help Wyatt more than ever because he had neglected him for the first 17 years of his life. Judd had no intention of giving up straight now. He was simply going to use up the sick days he had accrued over the previous 20 years. Only after it was over would he decide to leave. Judd, though, respected Owen too much to play games with him. He traveled to Owen's house. He informed Owen that he was leaving his position and that he would not be persuaded otherwise. He didn't care that he had no background in healthcare or understanding of what it was like to be a full-time caretaker. He wouldn't regret prioritizing his son, and he did so. Relationships between fathers and sons can be challenging. Owen recognized that. Carlos was also aware of that. Gabriel made Carlos an offer to join the Texas Rangers as they were enjoying cocktails with his father and TK. Carlos declined it. Additionally, he charged that the Texas Rangers were a racist group that preyed on black and brown people. Gabriel just got the impression that Carlos was embarrassed of him because of the manner he stated it to his father. Carlos didn't feel guilty. Because he was still wounded, he simply found a way to injure him. He and his father didn't always get along well. Now, everything was different. He is now loved and accepted for who he is, a gay man. Simply put, Carlos didn't want to work as a Texas Ranger. Later, he expressed regret for his actions to his father. He witnessed his father's transformation firsthand, and even though he doesn't want to become a Ranger like him, he is still very proud of him. Even Gabriel was invited to the wedding by him. Gabriel was ecstatic. When their doorbell rang, he was in the process of putting on his tux. As he approached his door to answer it, he was shot and killed. Everyone gathered for a funeral rather than a wedding. Carlos made the choice to put off the nuptials. After having just lost his father, he was not in the mood to be married, especially given that the person who killed his father had not been apprehended. Longtime Texas Ranger Gabriel was. Everyone assumed that his line of work made him enemies. They believed the person he shot was someone he assisted in apprehending. But Carlos discovered a fake bottom in one of his parents' dresser drawers. He gave it a crack. He discovered private documents that detailed an unlawful 2003 probe. Gabriel appeared to be looking into cartel connections between the Austin Police Department, Texas Rangers, and them. Gabriel aided in the defeat of these soldiers. He was going to provide evidence against the cartel. Only Carlos ever heard the texts in which someone from the cartel advised him to get the flu on the day he delivered testimony, and called him on his burner for the case, not what his father stated. He guessed his father disregarded them. He assumed that the cartel gave up attempting to persuade him. He thought they had murdered him. He also believed that if a white Texas Ranger had been shot, the organization would have done all in its power to find a solution. They refused to allow it to become a cold case. Carlos has little faith in the Texas Rangers. He made the choice to go out and find his father's killer. He obtained the messages from his father's burner and connected Pablo Martinez to them. He was a low-level criminal linked to the cartel Gabriel was looking into. Carlos attempted to kill Pablo because he was so certain that he had killed his father. He was stopped by Owen. TK had visited Owen because Carlos was causing him concern. Carlos wasn't eating or drinking, as he could see. He was merely determined to find the person who killed his father, and TK didn't want him to make a decision from which he couldn't walk away. Ty O'Brien was contacted by Owen. Ty got in touch with Gabriel's superior at the Texas Rangers. Carlos was given assurances that Pablo wasn't the murderer. Pablo worked as a covert officer. He supported Gabriel's argument against police misconduct. The voicemails were outdated. There was no threat of death. Gabriel was fortunate not to have to testify, but Pablo was legitimately afraid for his life. The cartel boss struck a bargain. To avoid the death penalty, he accepted a deal. Carlos was stopped before he could expose Pablo's cover since he had been wrong about everything. Carlos came dangerously close to making a fatal error. Only he now understands that delaying the wedding was a mistake. He went back to TK and renewed his proposal. He requested that the wedding proceed. Despite all of his sorrow, he wanted to celebrate something positive. Later, in front of friends and family, Carlos and TK were united in marriage. Their officiant was Paul. Carlos's best man was Iris. The newlyweds had no regrets about any aspect of their stunning wedding. Even Owen's new family showed up. Robert informed his family of his illness. They responded considerably better than he anticipated. Despite realizing he had misjudged them, he continued to harbor suicidal thoughts. He shouldn't have carried it out, thought Owen. He made an effort to dissuade Robert, and Robert continued to carry out his strategy. A few days after the wedding, Robert committed suicide, and Owen stood at his side. I appreciate you watching, and please remember to like, share, and subscribe.